Hello students, today we are going to start chapter number 1 of geography, that is an introduction to resources. Before starting with the chapter, let's discuss about those things which help us to survive on earth and how do we get it. Some of these things such as air, water, soil, sunlight, mineral, winds, etc. are components of nature and they are very necessary for our survival and it satisfies our needs. Even as per our requirements, we modify these natural things to satisfy us, such as electricity, books, clothes, etc. And these things have usability and value. So let's know more about these things. So topics which we are going to cover are introduction to resource, natural resource, types of natural resource, classification based on origin, classification based on development, and classification based on distribution. These are all topics which we are going to discuss in this video. So let us first discuss about the topic resources. Now, see children, we were talking about various things or elements of the nature which are very helpful for our survival. We were talking about air, water, uh, then plants, animals. We were talking about minerals, soil, everything. So these elements of nature are useful for our survival. So from here what we get, what is the definition of resource? Anything that can be used to satisfy our need is a resource. Now suppose for example when we feel thirsty we drink water. So here water quenches the thirst. So water is satisfying our need. So water becomes the resource. So in this way anything, water, electricity, rickshaw, vegetable, textbook, anything which is very common but that satisfies our needs is called as resource. That means it has utility or usability. What makes an object or substance a resource? Now another thing that makes a resource, that a thing which has value. Value means worth. Some resources have economic value, some do not. For example, metals have an economic value. A beautiful landscape may not, but both are important and satisfying human needs. Like suppose if I want an ornament made of gold, then I have to pay the price for it, isn't it? Because I like it, I want to wear it, and that satisfies it gives me pleasure, and in that way it is satisfying my need. At the same time, when I visit any beautiful place and I see a scenery and beautiful landscape, and while standing there I am feeling very nice. So what I'm getting a pleasure from that. So that landscape in front of my eyes, it has value, but in economic terms it doesn't have any value, but that moment I'm getting pleasure from that scenery, so it has value. That nature gives or it satisfy my feeling, so that is also having value, but it doesn't have economic value. So here resource has value or it has worth. Now early humans were unaware of the utility of these natural resources. So they were fully dependent upon the environment for their needs. With the passage of time, humans developed different techniques to convert these natural resources into useful articles that could satisfy their every need. Now, technology is developing at a faster rate. Human beings are using new methods to conserve available resource, and to minimize wastage. We should understand that although nature's gifts are endless, we need to use them carefully so that they are not destroyed forever. So resource is very important and we have to conserve it so that we can use it over time. Here we will discuss about the types of resources. Resources are further classified into three: natural resource, human-made resource, and human resource. Natural resources are further classified into actual resource, potential resource, abiotic resource, biotic resource, renewable resource, and non-renewable resource. These classifications are based on origin, development, renewability, and distribution. So, let us start with natural resources. Now, what are natural resources? A natural resource is what people can use, which comes from the natural environment. Examples of natural resources are air, water, wood, oil, wind energy, natural gas, iron, and coal. These substances of nature are found on the earth that are used without much alteration are called natural resources. These are the gifts of nature. Some of these resources can be used directly. For example, water, air, fruits can be used directly, while minerals have to be separated from their ores. We get petrol, diesel, and wax from the crude petroleum after refining. So we can say that most natural resources provide us with raw materials and we have to process them into useful products that are fit for human consumption. So further what we find classification of natural resources, and these classification are based on their origin, development, renewability and distribution. So let us first see the classification based on origin. Here we will classify the natural resources based on origin. The natural resources on the basis of origin, it is classified into two. First, that is abiotic factors, and second, that is biotic. Abiotic resources are found from physical or non-living environment. They include air, water, land and minerals. Some of these resources can be drained out by excessive use because they are limited in quantity in nature. Their total reserve cannot be increased by human efforts. These resources are in great demand for development of industries, whereas biotic resources are derived from living organisms. They include all the living organisms present in the environment, such as plants, as cereals, crops, fruits, vegetables, animals, microorganisms, and human beings. All belong to this category. Most of the biotic resources have the capacity to reproduce if the environmental conditions are favorable. So, this is the categories of natural resources based on origin. Here is the types of natural resources which are classified on the basis of development. On the basis of development, natural resources can be categorized into two, that is potential resources and actual resources. Potential resources are those resources whose total available quantity is not known at present or which is not being used currently, whereas an actual resource is one which we use currently. Second, a potential resource can prove useful and become an actual resource in the future, whereas an actual resource might have been a potential resource in past, but it may end up in the future, and presently it is in use. Examples of potential resources are like uranium deposits in Ladakh. We know that area has uranium deposits, but that deposits are not being utilized at present, which can be put into utilization in future. So we may not know the quality, quantity, anything about that resource. Whereas in case of actual resource, coal, petroleum, and other this type of resources are there which are in use for different purposes, for industrial based uses, different purposes we use that resource, and we know the quality and quantity which is presently found. Fourth point, the entire quantity of a potential resource may not be known, and whereas the actual quantity of an actual resource is known. Here are the types of resources which is classified on the basis of renewability. Now there are two types of resources, that is renewable and non-renewable resources. Renewable resources are inexhaustible resources, have the capacity to reproduce, regenerate or renew by natural processes within a short period of time or span of time. For example, air, water, solar energy, animals, plants and human beings are the best examples of such resources. Some of these resources are unlimited, like sunlight, wind and water, whereas non-renewable resources are exhaustible. That means once we use it, it finishes. We cannot reuse that resources and are available only in fixed amount. That means it is limited and they do not get replenished by natural processes. For example, coal, natural gas, petroleum and minerals like iron and copper. But with the help of technology, we can recycle some of the minerals like gold, silver and iron. But fossil fuels cannot be recycled yet. Here we have come to the end of the video, and the last topic of this video is the types of resources classified on the basis of distribution. On the basis of distribution, natural resources can be categorized into two: ubiquitous and localized resources. Ubiquitous resources are those resources which are found all over the world, means everywhere, whereas a localized resource is one which is found in a particular region or in a particular physical condition. Second point, its presence is not governed by physical conditions in case of ubiquitous. That means these ubiquitous resources are found everywhere. It doesn't depend on any type of or any kind of physical conditions. Whereas in case of localized resources, the presence of localized resources is governed by physical conditions. What type of physical conditions we are talking? Here we are talking about soil, climate, height. These are the things which are responsible for the distribution of these resources, localized resources. And examples of ubiquitous resources are air, water, sunlight, wind. These are ubiquitous resources which abundantly found everywhere and we can use it. Whereas localized resources, examples are all kinds of minerals like gold, silver, copper, coal, iron and others. But these resources we can't get it everywhere. We can get it in a particular place or region where the certain physical conditions which are required that should be present, and these factors differ so much all over the world. So we can't get it everywhere. Students, here are some questions related to the video, those topics which we have discussed in the video, and after watching the video properly, you can evaluate yourself by doing or answering these questions. Thank you.